Welcome to the Life Given Podcast, a Christian's place for current events conversations. I'm Isaac Lopez. This week, actually this month, in fact, I mentioned how April was going to reveal a lot about the United States. A lot was going to come out in this month, and I think we are starting to see a lot of the results. And I have to let you know, before I get into talking about what we're going to get to in this week's episode, I just need to warn you that I may come across as a little contrarian, might be the word. I don't want to be the contrarian just to be contrarian. A few times in the last couple of weeks, as I've listened to different podcasts and listened to different people's takes on the coronavirus, I've gotten angry, a little upset. I've gotten frustrated with how people are reacting or overreacting in one way, in one form or the other. And I think it's come down to a very important distinction. You're either in one camp or you're in the other. And I think people have colored it that way. And I think it's very rare to find someone in the middle. So I feel like everyone is pulling you to one camp. You've got to be over here if you care about the American people. If you care about the general public or the general health of the public, you will be in this camp. But I think that that there is a very important middle ground to find on this entire situation and this entire catastrophe that we're in the middle of. But there's got to be a middle ground, and in pushing back to find the middle ground, I will sound very negative. It will sound as though I am saying, no, I disagree with all of the public health statistics and what all the public health officials are saying. And I'm not saying that. Rather, I'm trying to find a balance to all the craziness, to all the crazy one-sidedness that we've had. So just as as an introduction to the rest of the episode, we're going to get into a couple segments where we'll talk about some of the statistics. And I think it will sound very contrarian, but really, I think that I'm just trying to provide some balance in a very, very unbalanced time. And we just need to be able to grab this problem by both horns and not just look at the one problem and the one-size-fits-all answer to this issue that we have. So, and for today's lineup, in the first segment, we're going to be talking about real numbers, okay? People that are all concerned about the coronavirus preach this about the scientific data, the numbers, the cold, hard numbers. So you want numbers, I will give you numbers, okay? Let's talk numbers and the issues that you want to talk about, okay? Second segment, I had this amazing interview with Nate Wolff, who's the owner of Humble Burger here in downtown Moscow. Had a great interview with him. Unfortunately, it won't all make it into this episode because it was so long. It was such an enjoyable conversation. You can catch that on my YouTube channel. Later next week, I'll upload it. But right now, you'll get his take on how small businesses are dealing with the coronavirus and the draconian ban that I think has been instilled in many states. Here in Idaho is not really an exception to some of those rules. And then in the third segment, I will talk about and kind of go over what is the new normal and what's the fallout from the coronavirus and what's to be expected after this. Anyway, so a chock full show. I'm really excited to just go through and work through it. If you're new to the show, welcome. Excited to have you on. And if you're an old timer, been around for the last 4 months, welcome back. And let's get to it. Welcome to the Life Given Podcast. So in this first segment, I want to take a look at the two camps. Right. I just lay down the dividing line that I think has become very evident in this time, and just get out in the open. And then we'll move forward and talk about what are some of the major discussions going on right now. So I think it's really become evident to me that there are two kinds of people, right? There are two kinds of people on this issue that seems to be so divisive throughout the entire country. And I think it shows there's a deeper message behind that. But you're either in the camp or in the party of the public health officials know what they're talking about, and if they say that we need to stay in our homes until 2021, we'll do it. Okay, slight hyperbole, but not much. A lot of people are in favor of trying to keep these draconian measures and until we are past the coronavirus and until it's safe to come out again. Okay, and in the second party, I think you have the people that are honestly more in the middle ground, more in the what is the middle of this issue, and that second party is looking with a little bit of disbelief, a healthy bit of skepticism. Is this really as bad as the government and as the public officials are saying? Okay, whether it's your state or federal government, this party seems to have lack of belief in what they're doing. I would fall into that party. So just buyer beware, listener beware. This is where I stand on this subject, and so that's going to be the tone of this episode. Okay, I think it'd be healthy if you disagree with me to let me know. Okay, there are different ways you can get in touch with me, either through the Life Given News Facebook page, the Life Given and Received at gmail.com, or you can go to the Life Given News website, join the podcast group there, and then you can give me feedback. It's free to sign up. All you have to do is put your email in and sign up as a member to the site. And then that will give you access to not only a lot of behind the scenes of what we're going to be doing here in the coming months, but also it gives you an opportunity to give me some feedback on what you thought. Okay, so once again, I'm just trying to start trying to create a culture of conversations around current events that I think is really lacking in certain circles today. Now, I want to open up with this video from Now This News. Okay, and I think the way that they phrase this caption to the video, it's very evident that they side with Governor Cuomo on this, the governor of New York, I believe. And this reporter, kudos to her, she asks a very, very difficult question, but it's a question that a lot of people in the public arena are feeling right now with a 26 million unemployment, with 26 million people suffering from unemployment. Rather, this is a question everyone needs to be asking their state governors, and finally someone asks, and this is the response. And I think it just paints the one camp that says we need to believe the public health officials. It paints their camp in a very crystal clear picture.
Worse than the illness if the illness is potential death.
Okay. Yeah, and this is going to capture what they have to say.
But there are protesters outside right now with horns and raising signs, and they're saying that they don't have time to wait for all of this testing, and they need to get back to work in order to feed their families. Their savings is running out. They don't have another week. They're not getting answers. So their point is the cure can't be worse than the illness itself.
Yeah.
What is your response to that?
That would be my position.
What is worse than death?
Somebody commits suicide because they can't.
Going to hell?
Yeah, but the illnesses may be my death.
I'm not talking about a spiritual life. I'm not inferring anything on that.
They said the cure is worse than the illness. The illness is death. How can the cure be worse than the illness if the illness is potential death?
Okay, so that's key. To hear some of the arguments that people like me lobby up.
Worse than death?
Is equals death because of mental illness, the people stuck at home.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't equal death. Economic hardship. Yes, very bad. Not death.
True.
Emotional stress from being locked in a house. Very bad. Not death.
True.
Domestic violence on the increase. Very bad. Not death.
Okay, can't argue with that.
And not death of someone else. It's not about
here we go.
It's about we. Get your head around the we concept. So it's not all about you. We get the economic anxiety.
Do you? Okay, so just a couple things I want to pull out from that video, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. Is with this kind of thought, with these kinds of arguments he lays out, I want to go ahead and answer those because I think those are the perfect, that's a perfect case, perfect example of what the one side of the arguments are, right? What is worse than death? What is worse than death? The first argument is what's worse than death, right? There can be nothing worse than death. So why don't you just stay in your homes? This is for the good of everyone, okay? And then the other one is that this is for the benefit of the greater society, right? This is so that your grandmother doesn't die or my grandmother doesn't die. They constantly use that argument referring to if you don't care about these measures and you're just outside running around on the beach in Florida, then you don't care about my grandmother. She's going to die because, because she's in the one place, the one age group that is most affected by this. Now, I want to get to that. Okay, I want to talk about the actual numbers with the Stanford study that came out on April 11th. Okay, it's probably been circulating in your news feed. I finally went to it and I took a look. Okay, and I think it has very interesting observations on it. Here in the first part, I actually want to look at how are we responding to someone who says you don't care about society. You don't care about my grandma, so back off, man, right? They're coming at you with those kinds of arguments, very personal, very touching arguments. How do you respond to that? Well, I just want to take a look at some of this, and it will finish up. It will culminate in the second argument because you've got to be able to take a look at this entire situation. Because once again, here's another disclaimer: I am not saying that the coronavirus is not threatening. I am not saying that it is not deadly, but I'm saying that this is an overreaction. All of this, okay? That this idea approaching the Moscow as if it's New York City is driving me up the wall. The fact that this is a one-size-fits-all solution, it's just foolishness. Okay, it's just a crap theory. Okay, so I want to take a look at they talk about some of the important arguments are the personal ones, right? They want to hit you where it hurts. And this is from U.S. News, an article that was released on U.S. News at the beginning of April. Okay, and I want to look at a few different things that have risen because of the coronavirus lockdowns. Okay, and there are three things that I think that are very important to consider whether or not we should keep up these draconian lockdowns. All right, domestic abuse, unemployment rate, and suicide ratings. Okay, and this is before we get to the cold hard numbers. Just let me warn you in advance. This is just if they want to talk about personal arguments that are like pull your heartstrings, this should be pulling their heartstrings. Okay, this should be showing them where their draconian lockdown measures fall short. All right. And so this is from the U.S. News, and there's a number of other articles circulating out there that I think is worth you just typing into Google, just like suicide statistics or domestic abuse statistics since coronavirus, and it comes it stems from some similar unemployment rate research. Okay, so the unemployment number total right now is 26 million in the US alone. Okay, so it spiked 4.5 million since like 24 hours ago. The Great Depression had only 15 million people out of work. Now, and it reached that, and that was at 24.9% in 1933. Okay, and then in 2019 it got down to 3.5. The economy was doing great on multiple different levels and multiple different factors. But what we're looking at right now is 26 million people out of work. Now, okay, I think the very different distinctions. The economy was actually going through a rough time during the Great Depression, but now it's just government enforced. Right. It's not like the economy was tanking because due to the coronavirus, they locked everything down, and that's why so many people are out of jobs, and so many people are living paycheck to paycheck now, right? And because so many people are out of jobs, I think that this is what this argument hinges on. It's stemming from some of the research that people have picked up from unemployment, right? There's a lot of public health concerns out there, but right now we need to, and I think Nate actually will mention this in the interview, and he makes a great point, but there's a very certain steadiness and certainty that having a job brings, right? And as a Christian, I don't want to be identified. I don't want to find my identity wrapped up in my job. But I want to be sure that I'm accomplishing my God-given drive to do good work. And there's a certain fulfillment that humans, men and women alike, find in accomplishing their jobs well. And now we're seeing people being locked away in their homes, away from their jobs, and they can't get out and do what they were built and created to do, and that is to go work. That is to go labor on the land and till and reap and sow. All of these biblical principles are founded off of working, and working daily, working your butt off and breaking a sweat. I think that that's just a Christian principle that we were founded on. And now you're putting 26 million people out of work and millions on top of that. I think I saw a statistic out there, and you'd have to fact check me on this, but 94% of the world is on some kind of lockdown right now. That doesn't mean that everyone's like the US, and that doesn't mean that everyone's like Sweden that can still go out and about. But it does mean that people are suffering from the effects of this. And I think it's really important to consider the effects of a ban like this throughout the US, in Idaho, in New York, and once again, New York, California, some of the hot spots. I think that you should take more drastic measures, because let me just make this clear. A few weeks ago, I was saying that I think this is okay. I didn't have a problem necessarily with the government trying to go, because there are so many unknowns, but there are more, it's becoming more and more clear that I think this is complete government overreach and that they're overreacting, and we need to get back to life as usual because of some of these concerns I'm about to bring up. Okay, so a couple of these things that the U.S. news, not like the news throughout all of the U.S., the U.S. news site released this article at the beginning of April, kind of elucidating some of the problems that joblessness incurs. Okay, and they were writing this during the time of the coronavirus, 3 weeks into the lockdown. So they were talking about some of the worries that already people around the U.S. are struggling with, the realities that are setting in, the struggles that people are having, are raising questions throughout the United States. And here are some of them. So another statistic to consider is that in the Europe and the United States, suicide rates rise about 1% every 1 percentage point increase in unemployment. So every time the percentage point increases in unemployment, you are going to see a correlation with the suicide rates going up. Because let's just face it, when you lose your job, that's really difficult. That's a tough time to go through. Coming from someone who's been laid off before and someone who's lost a job to different circumstances, it just rattles you. For you just have questions that you raise and ask and want answered, and sometimes the answers aren't there, and that obviously that's the time that you need to turn to the Lord and find that comfort and find that strength in Him, and make sure you're not putting your identity in your job. But the statistics like these show that Americans, people around the world, put a lot of worth in their job. They define themselves by their job, and for whether for right or wrong, they still they place a lot of weight in that. And so you see statistics coming out like this. So when the unemployment in the United States peaked at 10%, the suicide rate jumped, resulting in 4,700 plus deaths. And then there are just concerns that when you have 20 plus million people out of work, that you are going to see a corresponding rate of suicides and domestic abuse cases. And I think that is just being passed over and glanced over right now. And I think that when people come to you and say, what about your grandma? You know, what don't you want to just stay inside to protect the greater good, to protect those who may suffer from this? I think that you can make the same arguments on the flip, and I don't think that they're infallible. I'm just saying, I just want to make the point that you can make these arguments, right? You can say, hey, there's concerns on both sides. And now I want to get to the meat of it. Okay, move on to the second part. What's the meat? Okay. Uh, People talk about cold hard numbers, and there have been a lot of numbers thrown out there. And just for instance, when we first went into lockdown 6 weeks ago, the United States was talking. The United States government and the CDC were talking about that 2 million, like at most 2 million Americans would die, somewhere in between 1 million and 2 million would die from the coronavirus. And when you have deaths that are going into the millions, that's a big number. That definitely catches your eye. And when we had no idea what the coronavirus was and what it was capable of, and the statistics weren't out there yet, we're willing to be uncomfortable for a bit to save lives. And I'm not making any argument against those measures. But now they have dropped the number to a point, I think just a week and a half ago, where they're saying maybe 60,000. That might be the case fatality rate with, millions infected, or thousands infected. And we have places like in New York where the death toll is high, I think, in according to the ratio, how many people died to how many people have been infected. It's higher in New York than it is in Idaho. And what I want to have come out, what I would really want at the end of the segment, is to just be able to say with confidence that I think it's an overreaction to have this blanket solution to everyone's problems. And I think that it's just foolish to regard Moscow as a rural community to have the same effects that are going in place in New York. That's a city of millions, okay? That's a hub, an international hub of millions upon millions. And you have Moscow, which is a hub of 10,000 college students and 20 plus people in the population in a very rural area. And I think that it's just silly to consider that they're the same. Latah County here, I think, had four cases, no deaths, and we've had a loss of 22 million money. Sorry, we have lost $22 million in our jobs, and 3,000 jobs have been lost. Okay, so very different. I think that when people ask for the statistics and they look at the CDC and they still see, maybe 1%, 2%, even 0.5% of case fatality rate to those who are infected, I think it definitely raises red flags. It raises concerns. But what I want to get here with the Stanford study that came out, that it shows that the case fatality rate is much lower than people expected, and that more people have had the coronavirus than expected, to the 50 to 85 fold is what the Stanford study said. And we'll get to the quote here in a second. But I just want to really, really just hammer this home. And this was their conclusion. Okay, so you can go look this up on the SARS-2 coronavirus 2. We conclude, this is their conclusion to their study. They, I think, studied 3,300 plus people in the Santa Clara County. Okay, so this was their conclusion, that we conclude that based on seroprevalence sampling of a large regional population, the prevalence of SARS coronavirus 2 antibodies in Santa Clara County was between 2.49% and 4.16% by early April. Okay, so this was a few weeks ago. While this prevalence may be far smaller than the theoretical final size of the epidemic, it suggests that the number of infections is 50 to 85 fold larger than the number of cases currently detected in Santa Clara County. These new data should allow for better modeling of this pandemic and its progression under various scenarios of non-pharmaceutical interventions. While I think people have thought that that's probably like herd immunity, like people go on out, let's get back in the open, and we'll just develop the antibodies that we need to be able to combat this before we get a vaccine. And that's what mankind has done before vaccines were even a thing for thousands of years. While our study was limited to Santa Clara County, it demonstrates the flexibility of seroprevalence surveys of population samples now and in the future to inform our understanding of this pandemic's progression, project estimates of community vulnerability, and monitor infection fatality rates in different populations over time. It is also an important tool for reducing uncertainty about the state of the epidemic, which may have important public benefits. Okay, so what I want to do with that is, okay, that's the numbers, right? And I think this next clip that I want to see from the big conservative podcaster, Steve Deace, he makes a great point, and I just want to share straight from the horse's mouth what he had to say, and the numbers that were shown basically worldwide. If you follow his math out and take the mean between the 2.49% and what was it? So if you take the mean between 2.49% and 4.16% by early April, you will the mean is 3.33% or something like that. And then if you go down to it, do the math worldwide, people who have done the coronavirus, who have contracted the coronavirus, is the fatality rate is like 0.03%. And I just want to go ahead and share that clip with you. Here you go.
If you extrapolate the mean prevalence of the Stanford study out to the rest of the country, again, using that mean number of 3.33%.
So between the two, right? Between the two numbers.
It would mean nearly 11 million people in America have been infected with this virus. Okay. According to Johns Hopkins University, 33,398 people nationwide have perished. Well, with the Stanford infection rate, that would make the case fatality rate of the virus nationwide barely over 0.3%. Not 0.3% of the American people, but just 0.3% of those who have gotten the virus.
Okay, so I think that is important, and I'm glad I showed you that clip, or I would have been wrong. It's 0.3% of the American people that have contracted the coronavirus. Also, just a little thing on Steve Deace, one of my favorite podcasters right now. I think he has a great Christian beat on current events, and really someone I look up to and aspire to. But what that math I think that he does is really interesting. But I think the big point that I really want to push is that when people talk about the great risks that we're taking by the many lives that we're saving by staying indoors, there's more and more data coming out that is saying that this isn't that bad. Not saying that this is nothing, that it's just not nearly as bad as we thought it was. It's not nearly as dangerous as we thought it was, and it's not worth the economic impact, the psychological and sociological impact it's going to have on the entire nation. Now, I think there are certain places that should be locked down, but there are places right now that we are seeing, I think Sweden's an example, that have shown that we can still operate on a semi-normal basis and get some of these people who are hurting within, that have been trapped inside their homes, that can't get to work, get them back out in the open air and get them back to work. And I think consider about this lives that we need to be focused on right now. So with those numbers now out and coming from one of the most respected colleges in the nation with a great medicine program, from what I hear, that I think that is really important to take note of. And these are people that don't really have anything to gain. I think Dace made this point on his podcast, that they don't really have anything to gain to be coming out talking and offering this proof. I think that people are just really are being fed up with it, and they've had enough, and they're ready to go back to work, right? They're ready to get back and making a livable wage and getting back and to what was a great economy before January, before February, when we started to go into these lockdowns in different forms. And I just want to offer this up to you. And the question that I want you to consider, and the question that I think I've been wrestling with over the last few weeks is it worth it? And right now, I'm not convinced that what our government has put in place is worth it. And I think that they are hurting more people than they're actually helping. And that, just like the reporter at the beginning of the segment mentioned, that the cure is worse than the disease itself. Because if we took this advice, and why aren't we doing the same for influenza? Why aren't we doing for the same for other sicknesses? Why can't the sick people just stay home? Right. And I think that there are a lot of arguments to consider. I think that there are a lot of different angles we need to look at and evaluate this. But when it comes to the case fatality rate and those who have been infected, I think most people are fine to go back to normal, to go back to work and go back to making money and providing for their families so that they don't starve. I would love to hear your takes on it and hear what you guys have to say, because I don't think I've made a foolproof argument, but I also think that that's my stance, and I'm just trying to elucidate it. We are moving on to this fantastic interview with Nate Wolff, owner of Humble Burger here, a local smash burger place in town. My favorite place in town to get a burger. I think it's objectively the best burger in Moscow. Now, there are other great burger places, but it's my favorite. And it was one heck of an interview. We covered lots of ground. In fact, I think it was close to an hour and a half. It didn't make it all into this podcast, this episode, but I will be releasing the full form, the full version of it on Wednesday of next week. So stay tuned for that. I'll share it to my group on the Wix site and also on Facebook. So stay tuned for that, because it was a great talk, and you get to hear more about how Humble Burger began, the present, what Humble Burger is doing right now in these times. And that's what mainly you're going to hear about here in the episode today. But then Nate also touches on future plans for Humble Burger, and that all would be covered in the long form interview. So for this segment, we get Nate Wolff's take on what the coronavirus has done to small businesses, especially here in downtown Moscow, and some of the struggles that different businesses have, but also there are silver linings that I think you'll take away from this and be encouraged. And I hope that you enjoy listening to this as much as I did, because honestly, I just asked a few questions and Nate had some great takes. Here you go. For downtown Moscow, there's a very, very Northwestern feel to it, and it's can be a very hipster vibe down there. It's very, very alive. So when part of coming up and game planning for a business like Humble Burger, what did you see as unique about the downtown district of Moscow, and what did you think Humble Burger was bringing to the table?
I think downtown Moscow is a fantastic downtown community. I mean, we have really interesting stores, shops, restaurants, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's really amazingly walkable is the other thing that I think is really, really great about it. And also having just very cool things anchoring downtown, like the Co-op and the Kenworthy book people. Mikey's is one of those places that I feel like is legendary.
Yeah.
Outside of people who have lived in Moscow, but I think Mikey's is just amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just kind of one of those places that we were super excited to be a part of, because we've been going downtown, enjoying stuff downtown for a super long time.
Yeah.
And everybody who was already, part of the business scene downtown was super welcoming to us when we first got going, which is very cool to see as well.
Yeah.
But the big thing for us, one of the reasons why we did burgers in the first place, is because there wasn't a burger place in downtown Moscow anymore.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Back in the day, there was a place called Ted's that I used to go to. that had closed down like a few years before we started up. And it really, coming from California, it's like any downtown strip worth salt is going to have a burger place.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's really what we wanted to do, was kind of just bring this very straightforward, really simple menu and focus on using high quality ingredients and prepare them in a way that we thought was going to enhance their quality. And just kind of bring an old school hamburger feel to it, but do it in a way that's, I love places that are hole in the wall, some crusty guy like smoking cigarettes and flipping burgers, but I know that's not everybody's cup of tea. So we were just trying to kind of walk that line between doing something like that and then doing something that's more modern and more family friendly. That's the thing about downtown Moscow, is it's a great place for young families, people with kids. Everybody can kind of mingle and do basically, any kind of shopping you want to do, all within a 4 or 5 block stretch, which is pretty cool.
So anyway, to just pick up on that, I think it would be a disservice if anyone came through Moscow during coronavirus when everything has been shut down. And I think that I did not want to spend the entire interview talking about coronavirus, because everyone is talking about it. But I think part of the reason I wanted to do this interview is just the fact that I think that people need to hear from downtown businesses just on the state of things. So what has been Humble Burger's biggest struggle or biggest challenge on this? And then what would be like one good thing that you think you could take out of this moving forward?
I mean, probably the biggest struggle, and I mean, all of this stuff I don't think is anything specific to us. I think this is true basically any community anywhere right now. But at least for the first couple weeks, it was just kind of the uncertainty was the major problem, just because everybody kind of knew that things were coming down the line. Nobody was sure what those were going to look like. So early on, back in March, before even the dining ban had come into effect, I just kind of made it my job to start looking at the CDC guidelines and just try and base what we were doing off of those. And especially because I figured we're right next to Washington. I assumed that we were going to kind of follow what Washington was doing rather than what Idaho was doing for the most part. So at the time, it seemed like Idaho was taking a pretty casual approach to things. But being right next to Pullman, I was like, I don't think Moscow is going to be able to do that for very long. So, we've moved almost all of our seating out of the restaurant. We had seating for 10 people based off of that early CDC guideline inside the restaurant. And it was all spaced out. We just started to kind of do things like sanitize everything that anybody might be touching, every couple minutes, trying to stay on top of that stuff. But it really, the thing that was a killer for me every day was just kind of not knowing what we were going to be allowed to do, what the regulations would be. And that was true even when we got the regulations. Because city council passed the dine-in ban on a Friday, and they sent some couriers out to kind of take it to all the downtown businesses. So they brought it to me on a Friday afternoon, and I tried, of course, to call over to City Hall because I read through it, and some of the stuff was unclear. Some of it was pretty vague. And of course, everybody had gone home for the weekend. So I couldn't get a hold of anybody, which I thought was maybe not the most helpful thing to have done. I really wish, I understand they felt like they needed to take some action, but I really do wish that they had actually done it even a day earlier, or do it on Monday when everybody would be able to actually ask their questions.
Interesting. Okay.
It took me a while to actually get a hold of anybody to ask my questions, and what I ended up doing, because I was looking at it and it was basically, this is going to be a citable offense if you knowingly violate any of these things. So I called the police station because, I just reasoned that if anybody was going to give out citations, it would be the police.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just called over there and asked them, you know, what are you actually going to be enforcing?
Mm-hmm.
And they told me that the the guidelines were fairly vague, so they were kind of unsure about a lot of it.
Interesting. Okay.
Because, you know, I asked them, are we allowed to have anybody in the restaurant? Does everybody have to stay outside? Like, should we make a walk-up window? Can people sit at tables on the patio? All that stuff.
Right.
So, you know, we just kind of talked through that. They told me some stuff that ended up being incorrect.
Okay.
I ended up calling them back later to be like, I don't think that's actually
yeah.
And, you know, it was just kind of figuring stuff out on the fly, which is fine and, you know, is part of the deal. But it was just kind of the uncertainty, and especially at that moment, it felt like, you know, we were basically getting handed this whole thing with zero explanation. And it felt very last minute and very rushed.
Yeah.
Which I think it was, and I think that they rushed to do that for good reasons. You know, nobody's trying to do a bad job.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's just things end up happening in a way that's not really conducive to actually, like, making things work for everybody when they're done in a hurry.
Yeah.
So for the first couple days of that, you know, it was really just, should we shut down entirely? I'd had some conversations with other restaurant owners who were basically like, everybody who works in a restaurant automatically has to violate the, you know, social distancing requirements because we're all working in cramped environments.
Right. Yeah.
Each other. So some people just closed down immediately because, you know, they just thought from a just wellness standpoint, it made more sense to kind of shut it down, tell all their employees to stay at home, and, you know, kind of reopen whenever things looked clear again. I was one of the people who just figured, you know, we've had to make weird things work in the past, so we'll just do that again and just try and make it work. And luckily for us, our business model pivots into doing what we've ended up being required to do pretty easily.
Yeah.
You know, burgers and fries are a grab and go kind of thing anyways. So, you know, I felt so bad for so many of our buddies at restaurants downtown because they're basically being asked to rewrite their menu, come up with a new business plan entirely from what they normally do. And for us, that just wasn't the case because, you know, we're normally a place where, you know, drivers come and pick up DoorDash. And then get to go food all the time. So yeah, it was a really mixed bag with that stuff early on. But I would definitely say that as a business owner, just the uncertainty, especially of what we were allowed to do and not allowed to do, and what was best for the public health, all of that stuff was what made me lose sleep early on.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a business owner too, I feel a responsibility to, you know, keep my employees paid, and, you know, not even from just an economic standpoint, keep people employed, but I also feel like a mental health component exists as well, where it's good for people to actually, you know, have the stuff that they're supposed to be doing still available for them to do. So for us, that was part of the reason why we decided to stay open and just kind of adapt. You know, partially just trying to let everybody, you know, feel some assurance, both employees and our customers as well. And it was amazing in the first couple of weeks how many people came in and bought food and thanked us for, you know, still being open.
Wow.
It was very interesting.
So
I feel like I don't. The second part of your question though.
Go for it.
What was the second part of the question?
The second part, what is there any good that you think can come of this, and what do you think that might be moving forward? Like,
I mean, for us and a lot of places I have talked to, I feel like we have kind of gained some self-confidence through this, just by being forced to adapt and kind of take on, you know, new responsibilities to a certain extent, you know, doing call-in orders and online orders and all that stuff. So it has sort of forced us to do new things. And also, one of the other things, this is something that's going to be kind of, I think, a rant a little bit.
Don't go for it.
But one of the things I think has gotten kind of missed in all of this is just the early stuff about, stay at home and like slow down and take it easy. And this is time to kind of reconnect and recenter yourself. Really missed the mark, I think, for a lot of small businesses, because a lot of us don't have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
I would love to like hang out at home and read more books and like do more like idle leisure kind of things, which is kind of the way everybody started talking about it early on. But really, for those first couple of weeks, most small business owners I knew were working harder than they normally have to. And in some cases, a lot harder than they normally have to basically make a fraction of the money that they were.
Yeah.
So, people were like killing themselves to make 10% of their
Yes. Yeah.
which is, I feel like that's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle. So, I mean, it was great that a lot of people got to work from home and slow things down and not have to run around all over the place. But I also know that there are a lot of folks, specifically, in the service and restaurant industry, where it was just, and retail too, where it was, they're just staying up super late, trying to figure stuff out, working long hours, trying to make it happen so that they can actually keep their employees on staff, like all that stuff.
Right.
And then at the end of the day, there just weren't that many people out and about buying stuff because they were told to stay at home. So, I mean, I think there is some good that comes out of that, though, that kind of shows you how resilient your business can be.
Right.
I've been really pleasantly surprised with how few businesses I know of are in trouble in a serious way. It seems like everybody's kind of figured out how to make it work for the most part, which is really, I think, an incredible testament to everybody's ability to just kind of cope and figure out a way to make it through.
Yeah. So, no, that's an awesome answer. And it's been increasingly evident, at least to me, just listening and doing research, and that I think that initially, I think the stay-at-home order, that's fine, good. And I think that, like you mentioned, it's well-intentioned, but it's starting to put a chokehold on the economy and just on the smaller businesses, because I think that there is a timer if you continue to let it run out till, some people are talking about bringing sports back, in 2021. And if they're going to try to put any kind of pressure like that on small businesses, they're asking too much, I think, at that point.
I am curious with a lot of that stuff. We're obviously, it's fairly early days kind of moving into that phase of it, but just coming up with actual concrete benchmarks that are going to mean that we start to relax certain restrictions, right? And what people in authority are actually looking for. I'm still not entirely sure. Just from the state of Idaho's standpoint, our governor said he wanted to see a couple weeks of decline in new cases, etc. Right. But when he said that, we were already in the middle of a downward trend. So I don't know how much more of that he's actually looking for. I also, like I'm sure a lot of other people, I am not really checked in on that the same way that I was weeks ago. That's another weird thing about being a downtown business is I've just gotten to watch over the last couple of weeks, more and more people just kind of realize we've been doing this for a month. We're going to kind of get back to normal life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, 3 weeks ago, downtown Moscow was a total ghost town. But the last 2 weeks, especially now that the weather is turning nice,
right?
It's kind of back to being like, it's not hard to find a parking spot, but at least there are people downtown and you can notice it because cars parked, people are walking around doing their thing. So I am curious how much longer everybody's actually going to follow the restrictions. That would be my worry at this point if I was in charge, is how do you convince people to still follow guidelines?
Yeah. And especially like if Governor Brad Little is talking about how he wants to see a decline. Well, as soon as everyone comes back and we get more testing, the numbers are going to go up just naturally because people are going to be around each other. And I think there is something to herd immunity. I've been hearing more about that. And there's recently a Stanford study that came out. And I think basically said that all of these statistics the CDC has been using are bunk. Like this, like I've been hearing that coronavirus was probably here, months before we actually thought it was here. And then at that point, we actually probably do have the antibodies in our system to combat the virus.
My parents live in the Bay Area. They're right next to Stanford. My dad told me that they just realized that they had, it's either 1 or 2 coronavirus deaths, but I mean, like a month before they thought the first thing that happened there. So yeah, who knows at this point? It seems to me that one of the lessons to be learned from this whole thing is that our science and medicine that we really believe in, and for many, many good reasons, are actually fairly fallible.
Yes.
Things are moving quickly.
Yes.
Just like I've heard so many different expert opinions that say totally different things.
Yeah.
And also, you can hear one person say something one week and then they change what they're saying the next week. And who knows?
Yeah, I did hear this theory, and I'll share it before we move on, but that do you follow the NFL at all?
A little bit.
Okay, so the 49ers, they played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And as a Chiefs fan, that was the first time we'd been there in 50 years, all this. And
it made my family so sad. They're all Niners fans.
Okay, the 49ers have won like 5 or 6 times. So the Chiefs need one break. But I heard that there was this doctor that came out in San Francisco and mentioned how the Chiefs might have saved the world because they actually won. And so the big parade that happens the weekend after the Super Bowl happened in Kansas City. And like the night that the 49ers would have been celebrating their win of the Super Bowl, 2 coronavirus patients were taken to the hospital and they were diagnosed with the coronavirus. So he mentioned like if we hadn't really done any shutdown, anything like that, but this would have been middle of February, so the virus was definitely over here, and San Francisco has been kind of a hotbed for it. So they've talked about if there's like 1 million to 2 million people congregating for a Super Bowl parade, it might have been very, very dramatic. But thanks to the Chiefs, we might have saved everyone in San Francisco because we beat the 49ers. But
Patrick Mahomes, he's Superman. Saving the world.
Yeah, he is Superman. That's what Chiefs fans like to believe. Anyway, actually, you mentioned something about a while back about how a lot of downtown businesses really wanted to keep their employees working, and you mentioned for the mental health, but also for that livable wage. That's something that Ruth and I have greatly appreciated. And I know a lot of my friends who have worked at one time or another, HB, George especially, they've really benefited from the kind of hourly wage that you pay there. And it's almost double what other people are paying someone in town. So why did you want to pay your employees so well? Which I'm not complaining because I definitely appreciate it. And then how do you make that work compared to other people who only pay for their employees bare minimum?
For the hourly wage, that was just a decision that we made when we were actually coming up with a business plan for the restaurant. So that's something that we just kind of baked into what we were going to do from the beginning. And it's a lot easier, I think, to do things that way because then you have to make the numbers work from the get-go rather than come to a decision later on and then try and figure it out. So for us, it was just sort of, we wanted to do this mainly from, we're a bunch of weirdos. Like we have a bunch of weird philosophical and theological ideas about things. And you know, I have a background of, you know, being really into punk rock music.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite bands is a Washington D.C. band called Fugazi.
Okay.
Who, a couple guys who were instrumental in the hardcore punk scene back in the 80s and ended up forming this other band, Fugazi. They were actually really influential and very famous in musical circles, but most people haven't heard of Fugazi. They're not a household name.
Right.
They're not really like rock stars. But one of the things that they wanted to do was set ticket prices at a certain level and just kind of, you know, keep almost artificially low ticket prices. So who wanted to come see the shows could come see them. Like, you know, just make it so the kids could actually afford a ticket rather than, you know, end up going to an arena and having people pay like hundreds of dollars. Whatever. And that was just something that they decided to do from a philosophical standpoint. So when we were starting to talk about forming a company and having employees, I was like, I don't feel like I ever need to make a huge amount of money off of whatever we're doing.
Right.
And, you know, I know a lot of people who get into business because they want to make money.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. But from our standpoint, we wanted to start a business because we thought it would be a fun thing to do. And that's one of the things that's kind of kept us going, is just making things set up in a way where we don't feel bad about just kind of doing fun things that lose us money.
Right.
So just kind of holding those things loosely, like holding profit margins loosely, all that stuff has been very healthy for us.
Yeah.
And allowed us to do things like pay our employees $12 an hour as a starting wage, just because, you know, at the end of the day, we are just kind of like, you know, we don't have any investors. We're not beholden to anybody.
Right.
We don't have bank money that we're paying back. Like, we haven't gotten loans from anybody.
Yeah.
So, you know, we can afford to pay people a little bit better just because we're not too concerned about making a huge amount of money. That's not why we got into it in the first place. So we're not taking a vow of poverty or anything like that.
Right.
But there is just kind of that attitude of, you know, we want to do as good a job with Humble Burger as we possibly can. And that extends to all areas. So that extends to the way we treat our employees, the food we serve, the way that we participate in downtown Moscow,
right?
All that stuff. It really is nice that we had at the beginning, Chris, Hannah, and I were just three weirdos with weird but similar ideas about that stuff. So when we first were talking about it, all three of us were like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, we should just try and pay people as best we can from the beginning. And that's still something we're working on. One of the things that I'm trying to do with Humble Burger, which unfortunately, because of what's going on currently, has been delayed, is I'm actually looking into doing an employee ownership scheme.
Okay.
So we're going to hopefully end up changing the structure of the company at some point.
Okay.
And we want to actually give our employees ownership as, you know, a reward for the work that they do.
Right.
It's one of those things that's a little tricky to figure out, but I do think that it's a very healthy thing to have everybody invested in kind of the same way, working on a project like a restaurant or any other business. So that's something else we're looking at doing as well. Because again,
so what does that all entail? Like, if you have all your employees involved in the ownership of the place they work for, what does that mean?
So one of the businesses I actually have been impressed by for a long time is Winco. Winco actually distributes ownership to its employees. It's an employee-owned company. NRS, which is in town, same employee-owned company. And that basically just means that you're bestowing, you know, certain percentages on employees. For us, it's probably just going to be a time-based thing, like base it on experience and how long you've been in the company. And then, you know, as the company profits, the owners get to take a cut of those profits, you know, if you're not using that money to pay down debt or buy new equipment or anything like that. So that's what we're hoping to do with it, is, you know, use it to actually get more money out of the business and into the hands of employees and actual people. So that's, that's something that we're planning to do. Yeah. And it's something we've been talking about, but this is the year that I was like, at the beginning of the year, you know, we're going to make it happen.
Right.
But now there isn't really any money to do anything with anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. That rolls well into the next question, is just how do you think you, other businesses, are going to bounce back? Because you mentioned like there are 2 waves in the year, and that's like when the students are leaving, graduating in May, and then when they come back in August and in early fall. So is that concern? I mean, it's kind of took away 5 or 6 weeks of really good income.
I mean, it didn't hurt us this time around in a catastrophic way. We actually, I don't know if Ruth told you this, but we got our EIDL grant.
Oh, okay. She did mention that. Yeah.
Which was a thing that the SBA did as kind of a front runner to the Paycheck Protection Program that everybody's been talking about.
Right.
Total catastrophe.
Yeah.
So we applied for that a month ago.
Okay.
And that was supposed to be a really quick turnaround thing, because, you know, they basically were like, apply and we'll send you $10,000 to just kind of help out in the immediate short term. And then it took them a month to get it to us. But, you know, hey, we ended up getting some money, which has kind of helped out, at least, you know, for a business as small as ours.
Yeah.
We have 15 employees, and, you know, we're not making millions of dollars every year.
Right.
Like $10,000 cash infusion is actually kind of a big deal for us. So that's bumped us back up to where we were when all of this started.
Okay. Wow.
We had just been kind of like whittling down the bank account over the last 2 months. And, you know, the unfortunate thing for a lot of businesses in Moscow is when this hit basically at the end of the slow season.
Right.
So everybody's bank account is basically as depleted as it possibly could be. And this is the time when everybody starts adding money back into their bank account.
Right.
That's going to help them out at the end of the year.
Yeah.
That's the way we approach it, is, you know, we make money that we get to hang on to until we have to use it again in December, January, and February.
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, this all hit at the end of February, early March. Right. Which is basically when you've used up all those cash reserves anyways.
Yeah.
So for us, getting that EIDL grant is really nice, because it basically just sets the clock back to, you know, where we were at the end of February. And now things have actually picked up downtown Moscow. So we've started hitting more, you know, it's not normal, obviously, because it's still, there's weird stuff, but it feels more like a springtime level of sales. Okay. So we're no longer like losing a little bit of money every week. We're not making a little bit of money every week. And that's just like the last 2 weeks. Yeah. Seeing that shift. So, you know, like I was saying, downtown Moscow has started to come back to life a little bit. Yeah. That springtime rejuvenation.
People coming back out from under the rocks. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some concern. I'm trying to tell as many people as possible, the time to be concerned about small businesses in Moscow isn't really right now. Like I said, everybody seems to have figured out ways to just kind of muddle through what's happening.
Yeah, stay afloat.
Yeah, we're all able to just kind of stay alive. The problem is going to be if at the end of the year, if we don't have another major spike in sales in August and September, like for instance, if the virus makes a comeback, you know, schools aren't allowed to meet in person, all that stuff. Students don't come back, then we're going to start seeing some businesses fail and some actual problems, I think, at the end of the year. Yeah. So that's the thing. I'm not super concerned about it, because I do feel like we've kind of made it through the worst part of it.
Right.
Mainly because it was just so unknown.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is unprecedented.
Yes. Yes.
Like I've lived through a few of these health scares, and we had the economic recession hit when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is totally different than any of that stuff. But you know, now like everybody's still sounding like they're really worried about what's going to happen if the virus comes back.
Yeah.
But to me, it's less of a concern because at least now we've seen how everybody reacts.
Yeah.
And we've seen what the decisions are that folks in authority have made, and we've managed so far to survive all that. So I feel like there are way less unknowns if this comes back again in the fall.
Yeah.
The only real problem again is going to be, you know, the decisions that are made, what happens to the economy in Moscow and elsewhere, and just how, you know, that impacts what everybody's able to do sales wise in the fall. So that's the thing that I'm most curious about at this point.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And I mean, everybody's kind of pushed everything back into September anyways.
Yeah.
So September might be just crazy busy. It might be enough to make up the difference in a lot of ways, because, you know, you've got graduation ceremonies are going to happen in September.
Right. Yeah.
You know, students hopefully will be back. There's probably going to be a lot of events that got moved from the spring into the fall happening. So who knows? I mean, it might end up just kind of evening itself out. And, you know, maybe we all take a, you know, minor percentage hit on sales over the course of the year. But, you know, there's also all this government money floating around. So hopefully the people that really need it actually end up getting it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And I don't want to keep you much longer because I think we have to get to doing stuff here. But as the last question, just for kicks, if you were in a position of authority, say Moscow City Council, and this struck, coronavirus happens, and you could have had some say in the decision, how would you have wanted to react, and what would you have implemented?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very tough hypothetical because, you know, even for us idealists and dreamers, like there's still the reality of the situation.
Right. Yeah.
And even though I think a lot of us would assume like, yeah, I would react in a more sane way and take my time. Like who actually knows? Because I didn't have to make those decisions.
Right.
For me, I think the big one is just communication. I feel like, and this isn't just a criticism of local government.
Right.
I mean, this is a criticism across the board, because I feel like one of the biggest elements of this that nobody has really drilled down into has just been how bad the communication has been about all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really been like, if I was an English and communications major, and I'm just thinking about one of my professors would have lost her mind.
Yeah.
Just about, you know, things people have said, stuff that they just kind of like left out that's screaming to be answered, all that. I just wish that City Council and the city of Moscow had done a better job of communicating. And, you know, a few specifics would be on the dine-in ban. I wish that there had been more communication about that. I ended up calling the city supervisor at one point. I told him that he needed to put things out in more of a bullet point fashion.
Right.
Tell people what they meant or didn't mean. I told them I had other business owners calling me up and asking me what the rules were.
Right.
And I was like, the only reason I have any ideas is because I talked to you about it. But you don't want me to be your spokesperson on this.
Right.
You should try and communicate with everybody else. Because, I mean, even now there are businesses downtown who still are unsure about whether they should let people into the building or not. You know, stuff like that. And we've been doing this for 6 weeks at this point. So, yeah, I mean, just other communication stuff. For a city like Moscow, where everybody is all about community and togetherness, I haven't had anybody from the city reach out to me and even check in to see how I'm doing.
Yeah.
I think fairly odd.
Yeah.
I mean, we all got printed out things of rules, but so far I haven't gotten a phone call from anybody at City Hall or on the City Council asking
Yeah.
me how things are going, what can we do to help out. I wish that there had been more of an effort for folks in city government to communicate and figure out what business people's issues were. Because the other thing with that, along with the communication, the whole SBA loan thing has been a total nightmare, mainly because of the communications thing. People weren't sure how to apply. A lot of people ended up waiting in line because they were told they couldn't apply yet. And then by the time they realized they could apply, the money was gone, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I wish that we had local leaders who had actually taken point on that and not relied so much on federal assistance. Because I do think that there were a lot of things that we could have done on a local level that would have been really helpful and a lot more timely than waiting for, folks in Washington, D.C. or at the SBA to handle them.
Yeah.
And I understand everybody's, overwhelmed. There's tons of stuff going on.
Yeah.
I feel super bad for everybody involved with farmers market.
Yeah.
Because that's a total nightmare. Where, they're talking about hosting an event with thousands of people at it, which obviously any government authority right now is going to be like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out their stuff. And those are really the only people that I've talked to at the city, mainly because they have to talk to everybody right now to kind of figure it out. Because farmers market is supposed to start in a week and a half.
Right.
But they pushed it back into June. There was a lot of back and forth. I ended up asking a ton of questions and talked to Amanda, who's the farmers market manager, a couple times and just kind of figured stuff out on the fly.
Yeah.
But I wish there were more people at the city who had kind of been forced into having to deal with everybody in that way, because I do think that that's a much healthier way to solve problems than hope for assistance from the federal government and Small Business Alliance, all that stuff. So I don't know. For me, that's the big one, is just communication, and especially on the local level, just kind of making sure that everybody has all the information they need, and also, maybe figure out a way to help people in a real way on the local level rather than rely on federal dollars. So, in my administration, that's how we would approach things.
I'd be on board for that. I would definitely. I mean, I feel like it's better to err on the side of over communicating on something as tense as this and as tenuous as this. It's just so many unknowns, so many variables. So I definitely amen to all of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even just some of the decisions I thought were very weird, like closing down the recycling center.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't get that.
I mean, there are things like that happened that if somebody had actually offered up a rationale for it, and there had been a discussion about it, I think I haven't talked to anybody who thought that was a good idea. And obviously they didn't think it was that great of an idea either, because they reversed the decision, within a week.
Right.
So it's back open, and you can recycle your stuff again.
Yeah,
just stuff like that, where it's, even if you're making a decision that I don't agree with, if we can talk about it and I understand what the reasoning is behind it, I can get on board with it.
Yeah.
But, I also understand, it's really easy for me to sit over here and be like, if only they had talked to me about more stuff.
Right.
But in the meantime, they're having to deal with everything from, local hospitals and businesses and whatever projects they already had going on. So,
yeah.
It's a crazy time to be in government.
Yeah, crazy time for everyone. So, well, Nate, thank you so much for being willing to be interviewed and plagued for an hour and a half, basically. This was very enjoyable. So that was a great interview by Nate Wolff. I thought that was He had some great takes, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to him as much as I did, because honestly, that was a very easy interview. I just had to ask some few starting questions, and we were off to the races. So I hope you enjoyed. And once again, the long form will be published midweek next week on my YouTube channel. So go ahead and check that out, the Life Given podcast on YouTube. You just search that. So here for our final segment, I just want to talk about the fallout. What's it going to look like? Okay. And I think we've seen a few things established here that I think we need to define. And I think that we need to be aware of coming out of this time, because I think that we are going to be getting back to life as normal. And that's where I want to start, actually. What is normal after this? So we are coming out of a time that has shown that we will accept whatever the government has to say. Whatever the public health officials have to say, we believe that that is gospel truth. We have worshiped the government as an American society, and we have shown that we have established them as our idol and put them before our trust in God, okay? Because if you trust in the Lord, why should we fear? What should we fear? We can fear nothing. Death, what Cuomo was talking about, that's lost its sting. Right? So I'm not saying that Christians should be reckless. I'm just saying that Christians know the greater context, so we shouldn't be worried. And it obviously, people are going to struggle with worry and anxiety, but we have seen a culture and a society that have been run by the gospel of fear and panic and anxiety. And this is what we get. 6 weeks later, we haven't seen one letting up of the band. We've started seeing President Trump's 3-step plan being put in place. We've seen places like Texas rumbling to open up, but still, it's taken 6 weeks to open up. And I think that there might have been a precedent at the beginning of this to go into lockdowns, but I think we've seen that since even then, we didn't need to go into such a draconian lockdown, such a universal lockdown across the U.S. I think that we have seen that the American people right now, without God at the center of society, has turned away and allowed themselves to become gullible. And I think that it's really important now here that we should be opening up as quickly as possible because I think that we are receiving more answers. We have seen more data, and a lot of the data that has been coming out has said it's not been nearly as bad as anyone said in the beginning. As a matter of fact, since the beginning, right, numbers have been lowering. In the first estimate, it was estimated that 1 to 2 million Americans were supposed to perish from the coronavirus. Fine, I'm all for it. Let's protect those lives. I'm not saying that the lives that are being affected right now don't deserve protection. I think we can protect them, but in a much more healthy way for everyone involved, because it was dropped to I think what was the latest projection, like 60,000 or something like that. And then with this new Stanford study, I don't know what the projections are, but like how Dace shared in that clip, it's like 0.3% in the US, right? That's the case fatality rate. And I think that's something that we really need to know moving forward, is to be more wary of the precedent that has been established. And the precedent that has been established is the government can do whatever they want. And it's going to call for a time. This time is going to call for strong Christians that know the context, that know the greater plan, that know that there is a God and we worship and serve him, not man. And not to establish and not to create reckless Christians, but we are creating Christians that know and trust in the Lord and allow us to face problems like potentially a global pandemic head on. And that comforts me more than, say, a President Trump and the CDC. So from all of this, I hope that you're able to answer a few questions or ask more questions like that reporter in that first clip that I showed you of Cuomo. I thought that was phenomenal. And we need more people asking questions like that toward our starting locally at the city council, because we see more sheriffs and more police departments, especially in Michigan, where there are just ridiculous measures put in place that are just saying no, like just kind of like shaking off what the governor there, I believe it's Governor Whitmer, has to say. and what she's just the ridiculous laws she's putting in place. You should just go do some research on that. And I think those sheriffs are doing the right things, but you need to put more pressure on your local government, and then your state government, and then the federal government. Just start working up so that way we can protect the people that are suffering from joblessness, that are suffering from the side effects of that joblessness, and hopefully that we can get back to creating to a great economy that we had. But also, and when we come back, to come back and realize that there is more of a need than ever to bring the comfort of the Lord Jesus Christ to people's lives, and that we serve a God that is far greater than the God of government, the God of the CDC, and all of those World Health Organizations. Thankfully, we serve someone who is far greater than that, and I hope that you bring comfort from this podcast because of that message. And not necessarily from one Stanford study or from what the CDC has to say. Remember that there is a greater context, and that there is a comforting joy to be found in the Lord. So in conclusion, a lot to unpack there, a lot to discuss. And if you want to join in on the discussion and have offer some feedback, some critique to what I said in the podcast, let me know. You can get in touch with me either at the lifegivenandreceived@gmail.com, at the podcast discussion group on the Life Given News website, as we're trying to create a news website that is actually delivering the news and that doesn't lie to you. So if you're interested in that, go over and subscribe to the website, but also you should join the group on there, so that way I know who my audience, who I'm talking to, and you can have some feedback into what who comes on the show and what is on the show. And also the Life Given News website on Facebook. Get in touch with me on there. And also, if you're wanting a burger, go get Humble Burger. Support them as they get through this time. Hopefully it won't be very long, but they can definitely use your support in a time like this. And if you want to catch the full-length interview, that'll be released in just a few days next week. Stay tuned for that. And as always, remember, the life that you have been given and the life that you have received includes every area of life. Coronavirus is no exception. Ban is no exception. Thank the Lord that he has everything under control. God bless.